Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope that you have enjoyed the previous two videos on array slicing concept. Now it's time to move forward with another interesting concept, which is methods in Python arrays. There are tons of methods in Python arrays, out of which we are going to look into the most crucial methods which are applicable on Python arrays. These methods are inbuilt and it saves lot of time. So let's begin with the very first method inside Python arrays, which is an interesting method. You might have heard of this before. The first method is index method. So obviously the name suggests that it will return the index of any element inside the array. So here the definition is, it returns the index or the position of the element inside the array. This index method takes a single parameter, which is nothing but the element. We will look into the implementation of this. So here we are in the code editor, and here we have initialized a Python array of certain elements of integer type. Now let's try to print this particular array. We have stored the array in the arr variable, so we will print this variable and you can see that our array has got initialized. Now let's try to apply this. So for that, the syntax is something like this. We need to first write the variable name dot the index method, and inside which it takes a single parameter and it returns the position of that particular parameter. Parameter is nothing but the element which is located inside the array. So let's say we give the parameter as 9. As soon as we run the cell, we will get the location of the parameter 9. I hope it's easy for you. Now let's try to find out the location of the element 2. So the variable name dot index, and inside which we will put the element which is 2. Now let's run the cell and see what output we get. So here comes the output. We get the output as 1. So the position of the element 2 is 1. Similarly, the position of element 10 is 9. Now inside the array you can see that 10 is repeated many number of times. So the index method will print the position of the element 10 whenever it encounters it first. So first it encounters the element 10 at position 9. Hence it prints the value as 9. It will ignore the other positions wherever the element 10 is repeated. Now if you want to print all the positions of the element 10 wherever it is repeated, then we will have to manually write the code for this, so that we can get all the positions wherever the element 10 is repeated. So let's write it. So we want the answer to be in the form of list, where it will contain all the positions. So here I am using the concept of list comprehension in Python. So we will iterate over the array. We are going to store all the positions of the element wherever the current element is 10. So for that we are going to use the enumerate function. So I for I, comma x in enumerate of the array. Note that I will store the value of the position and x will store the current element's value. So we need to capture the position, which is nothing but I, wherever the condition satisfies that x equals to 10. So this will store all the positions of the element wherever the current element is 10 in the form of list. So let's run this and check whether we get the output or not. If you have any doubts in this list comprehension, then do comment me your doubts. So now you can see that we have got the output in the form of list, which stores all the positions of the element 10 wherever it is repeated. Now you can see inside the array that the element 1 is also repeated 2 times at different locations. So let's try to find out all the positions of the element 1. So you can clearly see that we are getting the correct results. So I'm now sure that you guys have understood the concept of the method index. Now let's try to move on to another method after the index method, which is nothing but append method. So append method, the name itself suggests that it is going to add an element at the end of the array. Note that it is only going to add the element at the end of the array, and it is not going to add at any other positions. So this is the speciality of this particular append method. The append method takes single argument, which is nothing but the element that is to be added at the end of the array. So let's have a look at the implementation of it. So here we have the same array which we have stored in the variable arr. Now the syntax is something like this: arr dot append, and inside which we need to mention the element that is to be added. So here we are going to add the element 10,000. So the cell has got successfully executed. Now let's try to print the array. So you can see that the element 10,000 is at the end of the array now. Note that if you want to add the element at any other positions, then you have a method which we have already discussed in the previous video. Now let's move on to the another method, which is count. So the count method, as the name suggests, it is going to count something. So it is actually going to count the number of times a particular element is repeated inside the array. Just remember that it is not going to count the number of elements inside the array. It is only going to count the number of times a particular element is repeated inside the array. For counting the total number of elements inside the array, you have a different function which we have already discussed. I hope you remember. Pause the video and tell me in the comment section. Now this count function is going to take a single parameter, which is nothing but the element that you need to count, that how many times it is repeated. Now let's try this. We are going to use the same array that we have used before. So the syntax is something like this: arr, the variable, dot count, and you can see that this function is going to take a single parameter, which is nothing but the element, and it is going to return the number of occurrences of that particular element inside the array. So let's try to print the number of occurrences of the element which is repeated only once. So if we write 4 as the element, you can see that inside the array it is not at all repeated. Hence the output comes as 1. Now if we write the element 10, now you can see that it is repeated 6 number of times. So you can see that we have got the correct result. This can be very helpful even when you are dealing with larger data. Now if we try to write the element which is not at all inside the array, so here we have written 5515 as the element, you can see that it will give the output as 0 because the element is not at all inside the array. Now let's try for the element 1. You can see that it is repeated 2 times inside the array, hence the output comes out to be 2. I hope you have understood this particular count function. Now let's try to move on to another method inside the array, which is reverse method. So the reverse method, the name itself tells you that it will reverse the array. So let's try this and see whether we are getting the correct results. So let's try this on the same array which we have stored in the arr variable. So the syntax is something like this: arr dot reverse method, and this reverse method is not going to take any parameter, and also it is not going to return anything. The thing is that the result will be stored inside the same variable. You can see that the variable arr now has stored the reverse of the original array. Now again, if I reverse the array, we will get the original array, which is going to be stored inside the same variable arr. So I am now sure that you have got this particular method. Now it's time to move on to another method inside the Python arrays, which is twoBytes. So the name itself tells you that it is going to display the bytes representation of the current array. So the definition says that it converts the array into machine values and it will display the byte representation of the array. This method is not going to take a single parameter and it will display the machine value representation in the form of bytes. So let's try this on the same array. So the syntax is something like this: arr dot 2 bytes followed by the brackets. Now you can see that it converts the array to an array of machine values and it will return the byte representation. So let's try to execute this cell and you can see that the entire array has now got displayed as the machine values representation. So this is the significance of this 2 bytes function. If you want to explore more about this, you can see the documentation of it. Now let's try to move on to another method in arrays, which is typecode. The method typecode is going to return the type of the elements that are present inside the array. Note that it is going to return the type of individual element. It is not going to return the type of the variable in which the array is stored. The type function is going to tell the type of the variable which it takes as the parameter, but the typecode function is going to give the type of individual elements. Note the difference between them. I hope it is clear. The difference between type and typecode method is always asked in interviews, so make a note of the difference between them and try to practice more about this. Now let's try to implement this on the same array which we have stored in the variable arr. So the syntax is something like this: arr dot typecode. Note that there are no round brackets. So you can see that the output has come out to be I. The I type code means the integer. You can see that the array was of integer elements. Hence the type code came out to be I. Now let's try to make another array with the type code Unicode string. So you can see that it is nothing but an array of characters which has a type code U. So we have stored it in the variable AR. So AR dot type code, when we will type, we can get the type code of it as U. U represent Unicode. Now I hope you have got the idea about the method type code. Now many get confused between these two methods, type code and type. If we write the type of the AR variable, then it will come out to be array because the variable contains the array. Similarly, if we try to find out the type of the ARR variable in which the array of integers were stored, that will also give the type as array because the variable contains the list of elements. I hope you have got the difference. Now let's try to move on to another method inside Python arrays, which is BufferInfo. Now this method BufferInfo will give the information as it will return the tuple representing the address in which the array is stored and the number of elements inside it. So the tuple will be of the length 2. First parameter of the tuple will be the address of the array in which it is stored, and the second parameter will be the total number of elements which are present inside the array. Now as you know that array or any other variable in Python is basically stored in a particular memory location. To access that memory location, we use this BufferInfo function. Let's try this on the same array variable. So arr.bufferInfo, the BufferInfo method is not going to take any parameter, and if we run this, you can see that we have got a tuple of 2 parameters. The first is the address in which the arr variable is stored, and another is the total number of elements inside that. So you can see that total number of elements is 18. So I am now sure that you have got this. This particular function or method can be asked in aptitude or in interviews also. So make a note of it. Now let's try to move on to another type of method inside the Python arrays, which is toList. ToList method is very simple method. The name itself tells that it will convert the current array into the type list. The main reason behind converting the array into the list type is that we can perform multiple operations in a list data type, which we cannot perform on the array. As you know that there are certain restrictions on the type array. So we can easily use this function and convert it into list. So let's have a try on this particular variable arr. So arr dot toList, and this is not going to take any parameter, and it will return the elements in the form of list instead of the array type. So I'm now sure that this is clear. So let's check the type of the arr variable. So you can see that it is still the array because we haven't stored the converted list type in any variable. So let's store it in the variable new. Let me first execute the cell in which we have stored the converted array in the variable. So now if we check the type of the variable new, it comes out to be list. I hope you have got this. Through this conversion, you can perform multiple operations on the list. Now the next type is twoUnicode. The name itself suggests that it is going to return the Unicode form of the current array type, which means that it is going to convert the current array in the Unicode string format. This method is not going to take any parameter. Now let's give a try on this. Note that this function will only work whenever the array contains the Unicode elements. So we have already initialized an array AR of the type Unicode. So you can see that the AR element has 4 elements of the type U. U represents Unicode. Now the syntax is something like this: AR dot twoUnicode, and when we execute the cell, we get the output as the string form of the elements. Now if we try to check the type of it, then you can clearly see that it is str, which represent string type. So I hope that you have got this. Now there are more important methods inside Python arrays which are yet to be touched. We will see those in the next video. Apart from the methods, there are certain functions also which we are going to look into the next video. So stay tuned for that. And till then, you can practice these methods, what we have discussed in this particular video. For more such videos, like, share and subscribe to my channel. Also hit the bell icon and don't forget to follow me on Instagram. Thank you.